This brings us to talking about the ngIf syntax that corresponds with ngTemplate. Now, at the moment, I told you to remember that anytime that you see this asterisk followed by an ngIf, that is in fact doing two things at once. Now, throughout our journey so far, we've been doing things such as property binding. When we look at, for example, a class, we use square brackets and then class, or perhaps we could use style or ngClass. We can also bind to things such as value and so forth. So when you see this asterisk, this is actually doing the property binding, and it's also creating a template at the same time, which means that now that we have broken out our cards and this nothing into two separate templates, we can now investigate this ngIf syntax on here, for example. Because we're going to use it straight on the ngTemplate, it means that we don't need our template ref. It also means that we don't need the asterisk, because the asterisk is essentially shorthand sugar syntax for creating this ngTemplate. So now we can say ngIf donuts.length, and then we can completely get rid of this. So we can save this out, and we can see that we have the exact same as before, which also means that we have this initial parent div, and we don't see this ngTemplate being rendered out as well. So you may be wondering, why am I showing you this? This is allowing us to create a more flexible template. We also have that ngContainer as well. Don't forget ngContainer, and ngContainer is typically what I go for. Why? Because I get to use ngIf in the exact same syntax. So we get to use ngContainer, asterisk, and then ngIf. If we then need to create a more complex template, we can definitely opt for this ng-template approach. So if we want a more advanced use case, then by all means go for this ngTemplate with this ngIf. Now you may be thinking, why are there so many different ways to do this? I'm just showing you all of the examples. And now we've actually finished all the examples. You now have the knowledge to go away. You can create basic ngIfs. You can use virtual elements with ngContainer. You can now use ngIf, else, and then. And you can also understand what this asterisk syntax was doing. It's essentially shorthand for ngTemplate and the property binding at the same time. So depending on what you want to do, what flavor your code base is taking, because by all means, there are so many ways to achieve the same result in programming, this is giving you a primer on all the different syntaxes and why we should adopt them. So that is pretty much it. What we have here, this ngTemplate, is exactly the same as doing ng-container, but of course, instead of this ngIf, because otherwise it's going to throw an error, we use the asterisk ngIf. And this just keeps things nice and readable and predictable. We know that using this asterisk is creating a behavior because we are denoting part of a template to be rendered based on a particular condition. So if we then save this out, we then have the exact same thing, this ngContainer with our asterisk ngIf and the ngTemplate. So the main difference between these is the ngContainer will render things out. We do not necessarily need to use an ngContainer with an ngIf. If we press save, this is just going to render it regardless. If we were to then get rid of our ngTemplate ngIf and hit save, you can see that they disappear. So by using ngTemplate, we're creating a template to then be reused at a future point in time, whereas ngContainer is simply for grouping elements. And our group, in this case, we only want to show based on our ngIf. So in my mind, this feels like the best way to go. Alternatively, we can also use this ngTemplate as well, and it gives us some more power if we want to create a template that's then going to be reused throughout this component. However, we will need to declare and tell Angular when to render that template. Now the ngIf directive is doing that for us, and we also have this hash nothing, which if we go ahead on our ngIf, we can say else nothing, and this works absolutely fine. However, if we do this with our ngIf, you can see that we have an expression error because that is not the correct syntax. We in fact have an ngIf else property. So we can say ngIf, and then you can see here that we have else and then. So this ngTemplate syntax gives us a finer grain of control, and we could then pass in our template reference to nothing, which then references this template at the point in time that we want to, in fact, go and grab it and then print it out. So you can see that when we save, we can empty things out. We can then have this ngIfElse, which is then essentially the expanded version of this nice, concise Sugar syntax that uses the asterisk, ngIf, and else. And you probably saw there as well, we also have ngIf and then. So we can adopt that syntax as well. But for now, we'll just leave things as ngIf because I'm very sure that you understand it. So that's it for this lesson. We've explored the entirety of ngIf, and it's time to move on to my favorite directive, which is ngFor. And there's so much more power that this feature can give us.